Does car insurance follow the driver or the vehicle? In most cases, the vehicle is the primary focus for car insurance. Now, there are a lot of scenarios where your personal car insurance will cover you driving someone else's car. Where that doesn't play a factor is many states that have personal injury protection or MedPay. Whenever you have a vehicle, if I were to hand the keys to a friend and they drove my car, if they get into a car accident, my car insurance will pick up that claim because I've given them what's called permissible use. It's different in every state, so you have to talk to your agent to make sure that that's available. But in most states, minus a few, there's California, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Missouri, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Utah are a little bit wonky with that. So be very careful because they limit the amount of permissible use. It makes sense to talk to your local agent. If you don't have a local agent, I'll put a link in the description below where you can get a quote and check with multiple companies, but also talk to an agent where you can get some advice. Having that car policy follows the vehicle. If they have permissible use, if they're a listed driver on your policy, then you typically have coverage if there's a claim. Let's say I'm driving someone else's car, a friend, a parent, and I'm not listed as a driver on their policy. In this scenario, we're going to say I don't live in the household. If you do live in the household, you've got to figure that out because there are some rules that get a little bit weird there because you have your own insurance that allow it. You got to make sure that you have liability risk on that. In this case, I don't live in the household. I'm driving a friend's car and I get into a car accident. Typically what will happen is their policy will cover the vehicle, and the ones that have split coverage or are limited in permissible use, then what will happen is they'll take all of the coverages that that person has and bring them down to state minimums. For example, let's say I had $100,000 worth of coverage for property damage and I get into an accident, but the state minimum is $25,000. So what will happen is that person's car policy will drop all those coverages down to $25,000. My car insurance will pick up the other $75,000 if it gets that high. Essentially, they're saying that yes, there was coverage for that. The state requires them to pay some of it, so they're paying the minimum, and my car insurance kicks in and does the rest. If I don't have car insurance, it'll just kick in the whole bill. Keep in mind, it's different with every state, it's different with every policy. Each company sometimes has the option of saying what permissible use is, so it gets a little bit complicated depending on the company and the state that you live in. Now I'm gonna go over the three types, which I probably honestly should have covered ahead of this. There's the permissible driver, there's the listed driver, and then there's the excluded driver. Permissible means you're just giving permission to use the vehicle. Most policies say if somebody has to be listed as a driver, they must, or they must be excluded. If I lived in the house and I have access to the car, they need to exclude me as a driver, so I'm not covered at all. In that case, if I drove the vehicle, got in the accident, none of it's covered. If I was listed as a driver, yes, you're gonna pay a premium. Sometimes it's actually cheaper to have me listed on a policy as a normal driver. If I have regular access to the vehicle, or if I drive the vehicle more than usually 2 to 3 times a year, is what most companies deem as a listed driver, then I need to be listed as a driver. It's not a permissible use situation, especially if I don't live in the house. If I'm constantly borrowing your car, I would be listed as a driver. The most common use of this is if somebody is elderly, they no longer have a license, but they keep their car, someone comes and drives them to the doctor appointments or whatever they need to be driven for. In other states like Michigan, where they have personal injury protection, typically the personal injury protection stays with the person at all times. If they don't have car insurance, the state picks up a certain amount. In other states that have MedPay, things like that, again, that can follow the person because their policy is protecting them, especially if the other driver, the owner of the vehicle that has the other policy, they don't have that coverage. In that case, my coverage would typically kick in and pay that additional cost because I'm paying for that to protect myself or others in the car. In general, it's a step down coverage where that insurance typically pays first and then my insurance pays second if I'm just borrowing a vehicle to drive. Now, other policies allow that in most cases where they're going to say if you drive someone else's vehicle and they give you the permissible use, then our coverage can kick in, just like if you were to rent a vehicle. Most policies, to almost every policy, will allow you to rent a vehicle and carry all of your current coverage over to that rental car. If I'm on vacation and I'm within the limits of the locations that they allow, which is usually the US, sometimes a little bit into Mexico, sometimes a little bit into Canada. There's different scenarios, but most of the policies cover that. In that case, where if I'm driving, renting a vehicle, I have coverage for those scenarios. The only coverage that I'm missing is the loss of use. So if I were to damage that rental car and they can't use it for 6 weeks, they're going to charge me a fee for those 6 weeks that they lose income for renting it out. Insurance just doesn't cover that part. So in that case, I would either have to purchase it from them, or I would have to just take the risk of owing them maybe $1,500, whatever their rental cost is, until that vehicle is completely fixed. If you are kind of lost with all of that, that's a lot we went over. There's the step-down coverages where they pay some, yours pays the other, all of those things. You really just should look at the main insurance companies that primarily don't care about that. They really just want you insured properly. You may pay a few dollars more for those premiums. That's why they have higher customer service, higher retention. A lot of those pieces, yeah, I'll pay the extra $5 or $10 a month. Just know I'm covered. Here's the top 10 coverage companies that you may want to look at. If you're still kind of figuring out what coverages you should carry on your own policy, my Car Insurance 101 will go a little bit more in depth. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.